They say we're all a creature of habits, and certainly my wife would vouch for that. And that's great if our habits are fantastic, but I think for a lot of us, some of these habits can be pretty destructive. And I'll give you an example of some of mine. And whatever habits you've got, I doubt they're quite as extreme as some of, you could say I'm on some spectrum here. I had fast food, no kidding, for 20 years. In fact, I went to the same fast food restaurant probably at the same time, 6 days a week for the best part of 20 years. So I appreciate that makes me a little weird. At the time, I was in a sort of a sense of delusion, I suppose, because I used to go to the gym regularly. I thought I was pretty fit. I never felt like I was obese or anything like that. But looking back, I was 23 kilos heavier then than I am now. And none of that, there might have been 1 or 2 kilos of that, of muscle, but certainly at least 20, 21 kilos of pure fat. Which is quite horrendous. If you imagine what a 21 kilo dog is, you lift that and carry that around with you every day. It's pretty crazy. And I had a couple of potential health scares probably about 12 months ago that kind of woke me up to the fact that maybe I needed to get a little bit more serious in my life. And it occurred to me that my nemesis was sugar. I always knew that sugar wasn't good for you, but I guess you don't want to look at stuff that, it's like if you know alcohol's bad for you and you love alcohol, you don't want to look at the research about alcohol. And the same for cigarette smokers. They don't watch the documentaries about cigarette smoking until they're ready to give up. So for me, I started probably 6 months ago looking at some of the research into sugar, and it was absolutely frightening. So I thought, well, you know, I'm not very good at cutting back on stuff. So I thought I've just got to make a few habit changes. And that's pretty much what inspired the Better Version project, because the impact of some of these habit changes has been absolutely profound. I can't overstate it. It's hard to believe the impact. So just to give you a couple of ideas, 23 weeks ago specifically, because I've been charting this on a daily basis, I gave up sugar. When I say sugar, chocolate, anything that basically obviously contains sugar. So chocolate cakes, biscuits, all that sort of stuff. Marmalade, for instance, jams. I thought it would be harder than it was, but it's funny when you just make a habit and you give up something. It's actually easier, I think, than cutting back. So what happened is the weight started falling off me at a rate that was just unbelievable. And it makes me doubt that anyone should ever have to go on a diet, because when you make some adjustments, you don't have to not eat food or eat food that's horrible. You just make adjustments. So my first adjustment was giving up sugar. The second adjustment was something called intermittent fasting, which is not entirely, it's not really fasting as such. I call it time restricted eating. But basically I gave up breakfast and I now eat twice a day. And what the time restriction component means is that you only eat twice a day, but you measure the time from your last meal of the day to the first meal next day. And I aim for around 17 hours. Now, once upon a time, I would have had blood glucose issues if I did that. The thought of going without breakfast would have been horrendous. But funnily enough, when you make dietary changes, you change carbs for fats, and I won't go into all that right now, but click through and there's plenty of links as to exactly what I've been doing, and I can share my spreadsheet, so nothing is hidden. So I started introducing this intermittent fasting. I started introducing a few supplements, nothing crazy, just coconut oil and magnesium tablets, because you do get a few cramps when you get away from processed food. And something called Bulletproof coffee, which I would highly recommend to anyone who's giving up breakfast, because you have a coffee with butter. I know it sounds horrible, but it's actually lovely. With butter and MCT oil, you won't feel hungry for at least 5 or 6 hours afterwards. Today, what time I ate last night? I finished my last meal last night at 5:30. I think it's 11:30 now. I'm not even remotely hungry now, and I'll probably eat at about 1 o'clock today. The point I guess I'm making is that I dropped to 23 kilos, and considering I thought I was only 5 or 6 kilos overweight, that's amazing. More importantly, my chances of getting diabetes, which is an absolute nightmare and will become an absolute catastrophe for our medical health system in the next few years, my chances of getting diabetes have probably been reduced by 99%. I was fortunate I didn't have type 2 diabetes, but with the amount of sugar I was having, I was on the way. It's been predicted, well certainly there are studies in America, and whilst we might think that Americans are all obese, in Australia we're not much different, to be honest. Something in the region of 40 to 50% of Americans and probably Australians over the age of 40 are pre-diabetic. Pre-diabetic means it won't necessarily show up in a blood test, but you're on the way. And pre-diabetic basically means that by the time you're 60 or 65, you might live till you're 80 or 90, but your quality of life will not be good. And that is alarming. There's very few things you can do in life that will have more of an impact on your health than making sure you don't get diabetes. And the beauty of diabetes is type 1 you can't do much about, but type 2 and what they call type 3, now it's not technically type 3 diabetes, but Alzheimer's and cognitive issues in your 70s and 80s, and they reckon 50% of people in their mid-80s will have some form of Alzheimer's, is directly linked to the amount of carbs you're eating. It's quite horrendous. Again, I'm quite passionate about this, and I've got to be careful. I'm not a doctor, but all the research is from people who are on the cutting edge of this industry. But I just want to give you a little sense of my experience. Anything that I'm sharing with you on the Better Version project is just stuff I'm doing. It's not to say you should or shouldn't do anything, whether you should eat more fat and whether you should give up carbohydrates or whether you should change anything. But I'll share with you what I've done. It's had a massive, profound impact on my life. I rejoined the gym after 4 years away 5 months ago, and already my power to weight is better than it was when I was 35. And as you can probably tell, I'm a lot older than 35 today. So it's all about habits, guys. I'd really encourage you to start just one habit at a time. And if you could only introduce one habit, believe it or not, it probably wouldn't be exercise. I think exercise is fantastic for mental health. So I'm a big advocate of exercise, even if it's just going for a 30-minute walk every day. But if I was going to start anywhere, I'd start with what I'm eating. I don't know what weight you are, but if you're more than 10 or 15 or 20 kilos overweight, just change your diet. You will feel terrific. Your cognitive skills will go through the roof. They'll absolutely amaze you. And you won't have to try and stay on a diet, because the sort of eating that I do is not a diet. It's just a change of habits. And when you see the benefits, you become so inspired that no food tastes as good as feeling fit feels. I know it sounds like a meme, but trust me, it's absolutely true. So that's what we're about in the Better Version project, guys. That's just a little bit about my experience. Click through and request my spreadsheet if you want it. I can give you the 24 weeks every day just filled out of different habits I've incorporated. It's about 15 different habits I've incorporated over the last 23 weeks. My weight is put down every single day. I haven't got my food types I haven't written down what I eat every day, but I've put down literally every day the gaps between meals, how long between meals, little habits that I've introduced, my exercise routines, everything is there. So if I'm saying I've lost 23 kilos, I'm cognitively way better than I was a while ago, that my power to weight ratio is as good as it was when I was 35, and I come from an international background, so I was a fit 35-year-old. So this is definitely not about me, but it's like, if I can do it, man, I know you guys can do it. So I want to hear your stories. I want to be inspired by you guys. So I've gone on a little bit with this video, but I think it's quite important, sort of just to hear it from the horse's mouth, the power of how just a couple of habits introduced maybe every month can compound to an extreme extent over as little as 3, 4, 5 months.